begin. I am Lady Rain, and this is the Reader's Nook. We are on Chapter 19 of The Stand, and we are going to read. Now, we did start reading this earlier, so you will hear some of the few paragraphs that I got in earlier. However, we got cut off. So we are going to completely restart with Chapter 19, and then continue on from there. So, Chapter 19. It had been so long since Larry had been in Times Square that he expected it to look different somehow, magical. Things would look similar and yet better there, and he would not feel intimidated by the rank, smelly, and sometimes dangerous vitality of the place, the way he had as a child. When he and Buddy Marks, or just he alone, would scuttle down here to see the 99-cent double features, or to stare at the glittering junk in the windows of the shops and arcades and pool halls. But it all looked just the same, more than it should have, because some things really had changed. When you came up the stairs from the subway, the newsstand that had been on the corner as you come out was gone. Nope, put them over there. Half a block down, where there had been a penny arcade full of flashing lights and bells and dangerous-looking young men with cigarettes dangling from the corner of their mouths as they played Gottlieb Desert? I don't know. Anyway, Gottlieb Desert Isle, or Space Race. Where that had been, there is now an Orange Julius. It's literally an orange juice place. With a flock of young blacks standing in front of it, their lower bodies moving gently, as if somewhere jive played on and on, jive that only black ears could hear. There were more massage parlors and X-rated movies. Yes, this is why I have the warnings, the triggers, because there are some what people call racial slurs, and then there are real racial slurs. Still, it was much the same, and this made him sad. In a way, the only real difference made things seem worse. He felt like a tourist here now. But maybe even native New Yorkers felt like tourists in the square, dwarfed, wanting to look up and read the electric headlines as they marched around and around up there. He couldn't tell. He had forgotten what it was like to be a part of New York. He had no particular urge to relearn. His mother hadn't gone to work that morning. She'd been fighting a cold for the last couple of days, and had gotten up early this morning with a fever. He had heard her from the narrow, safe bed in his old room, banging around out in the kitchen, sneezing and saying shit under her breath, getting ready for breakfast. The sound of the TV being turned on, then the news on the Today program, an attempted coup in India, a power station blow up in Wyoming. The Supreme Court was expected to hand down a landmark decision having to do with gay rights. By the time Larry came out into the kitchen, buttoning his shirt, the news was over, and Jean Shalit was interviewing a man with a bald head. The man with the bald head was showing a number of small animals he had hand-blown. Glass blowing, he said, had been his hobby for 40 years. That's a long time. And his book would be published by Random House. Then he sneezed. "Excuse you," Jean Shalit said, and chuckled. "You want 'em fried or scrambled?" Alice Underwood asked. She was in her bathrobe. "Scrambled," Larry said, knowing it would do no good to protest the eggs. In Alice's view, it wasn't breakfast without eggs, which she called crackleberries when she was in a good humor. They had protein and nutrition. Her idea of nutrition was vague, but all-encompassing. She kept a list of nutritious items in her head. Larry knew, as well as their opposite numbers: jujubes, pickles, Slim Jims, a slice of pink bubble gum that came with baseball cards, and oh dear God, so many others. He sat down and watched her make the eggs, pouring them into the same old black skillet, stirring them with the same wire whisk that she had used to stir eggs when he had been going to the first grade at PS 162. She pulled her hanky out of her bathrobe pocket, coughed into it, sneezed into it, then muttered shit indistinctly into it before putting it back. Day off, Mom? I called in sick. This cold wants to break me. I hate to call in sick on Fridays. So many do. But I've got to get off my feet. I'm running a fever, swollen glands too. Did you call the doctor? When I was a charming maid, doctors made house calls, she said. Now if you're sick, you have to go to the hospital emergency room. That or spend the day waiting for some quack to see you in one of those places where they're supposed to have walk-in medical care. Walk in and get ready to collect your Medicare. That's what I think. Those places are worse than the Green Stamp Redemption Center a week before Christmas. I'll stay home, take an aspirin, and by tomorrow, this time, I'll be on the downhill side of it. He stayed most of the morning, trying to help out. He lugged the TV in by her bed, the cords standing out heroically on his arms. You're going to give yourself a hernia, so I can watch Let's Make a Deal, she sniffed. Brought her juice and an old bottle of NyQuil for her sniffles. Stuffiness, and ran down to the market to get her a couple of paperbacks. After that, there wasn't much for them to do except get on each other's nerves. She marveled how much poorer the TV reception was in the bedroom, and she had to bite back an acid comment to the effect that poor reception was better than no reception at all. Finally, he said he might go out and see some of the I got the hiccups. Good Lord. Phoebe! Oh, dear God. You go. Bad. We're going to have to cut some of that cake. Yeah, just cut that part out. Okay, back in here. She got herself into some trouble. She decided she wanted some banana cornbread.
It's a big bite.
No, it's not. It's 2 pieces. Just cut on the outside. Cut on the outside. There you go. She decided she wanted some banana cornbread, apparently. At least she likes it. I know.
How much she took a bite out?
That's 2 pieces.
That is more than 2 pieces.
No, it's not. Depends on how big you make the pieces.
Can I just feed this to Harley?
Cut it in half. Give one to each of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I put her in here because she was on the counter.
I'm giving her one.
Fine.
She
Fine.
stole it.
Fine. Again. It doesn't teach her that. She got on the counter, ate some of the banana cornbread. Apparently she liked it. So they shared it with the other 2. At least she didn't eat the whole thing. No, she would not. But she would be in bed. Finally, he said he might go out and see some of the city. That's a good idea, she said with obvious relief. I'm going to take a nap. You're a good boy, Larry. So he had gone down the narrow stairs, the elevator was still broken, and onto the street, feeling guilty relief. The day was his, and he still had some cash in his pocket. But now, in the Times Square, he didn't feel so cheerful. He wandered along, his wallet long since transferred to the front pocket. Excuse you? No. He paused in front of the discount record store, transfixed by the sound of his own voice coming from the battered overhead speakers. The bridge verse. I didn't come to ask you to stay all night, or to find out if you've seen the light. I didn't come to make a fuss or pick a fight. I just want to tell you, if you think you can, baby, can you dig your man? Dig him, baby. Baby, can you dig your man? Excuse you? No. That's me, he thought, looking vacantly in at the albums. But today, the sound depressed him. Worse, it made him homesick. He didn't want to be here under this gray washtub sky, smelling New York exhaust, one hand constantly playing pocket pool with his wallet to make sure it was still there. New York, thy name is paranoia. Suddenly, where he wanted to be was in the West Coast recording studio making a new album. Larry quickened his step, turned in at an arcade. Bells and buzzers jangled in his ears. There was an amplified, ripping growl of a Death Race 2000 game, complete with the unearthly electronic screams of the dying pedestrians. Neat game, Larry thought, soon to be followed by that Shoe 2000. You'll love that one. He went to the change booth, got $10 in quarters. There was a working phone kiosk next to the Beef and Brew across the street, and he direct dialed Jane's place from memory. Jane's was a poker parlor where Wayne Stuckey sometimes hung out. Larry plugged quarters into the slot until his hand ached, and the phone began to ring 3,000 miles away. A female voice said, "Jane's, we're open." To anything, he asked, low and sexy. "Listen, wise guy, this isn't... Hey, is this Larry?" "Yeah, it's me. Hi, Arlene." "Where are you? Nobody's seen you, Larry." "Well, I'm on the East Coast," he said cautiously. "Somebody told me there were bloodsuckers on me, and I thought I'd get out of the pool until they dropped off." "Something about a big party?" "Yeah, I heard about that," she said. "Big spender. Is Wayne around, Arlene?" "You mean Wayne Stuckey?" "Well, I don't mean John Wayne. He's dead." "You mean you haven't heard?" "What would I hear? I'm on the other coast." "Hey, he's okay, isn't he?" "He's in the hospital with this flu bug. Captain Trips, they're calling it out here. Not that it's any laughing matter. A lot of people have died with it, they say. People are scared, staying in. We've got 6 empty tables, and you know Jane's never has empty tables." "How is he?" "Who knows? They've got wards and wards of people, and none of them can have visitors. It's spooky, Larry. And there are a lot of soldiers here." "On leave?" "Soldiers on leave don't carry guns or ride around in convoy trucks. A lot of people are really scared. You're well off out where you are." "Hasn't been anything on the news." "Out here, there's been a few things in the papers about getting flu boosters. That's all. But some people are saying the army got careless with one of those little plague jars. Isn't that creepy?" "It's just scare talk. There's nothing like it where you are?" "No," he said. And then he thought of his mother's cold, and hadn't there been a lot of sneezing and hacking going on in the subway? He remembered thinking it sounded like a TB ward, but there were plenty of sneezes and runny noses to go around in any city. Cold germs are gregarious, he thought. They like to share the wealth. "Janie herself isn't in," Arlene was saying. "She's got a fever and swollen glands," she said. "I thought that old whore was too tough to get sick." 3 minutes are up. Signal went through, the operator broke in. Larry said, "Well, I'm coming back in a week or so, Arlene. We'll get together." "Fine by me. I always wanted to go out with a famous recording star." "Arlene, you don't by any chance know a guy named Dewey the Deck, do you?" "Oh," she said with a very startled way. "Oh, wow, Larry, what? Thank God you didn't hang up. I did see Wayne. Just about 2 days before he went into the hospital. I forgot all about it. Oh, gee." "Well, what is it?" "It's an envelope." "He said it's for you. But he asked me to keep it in my cash drawer for a week or so and give it to you if I saw you. He said something like, he's goddamn lucky Dewey the Deck isn't collecting it instead of him." "And what's in it?" He switched the phone from one hand to the other. "Just a minute, I'll see." There was a moment of silence, then ripping paper, Arlene said, "It's a savings account book. First Commercial Bank of California. There's a balance of, wow, just over $13,000. If you ask me to go somewhere Dutch, I'll brain you." "You don't have to," he said, grinning. "Thanks, Arlene." Hang on to that for me now. No, I'll throw it down a storm drain, asshole. It's so good to be loved, she sighed. You're too much, Larry. I'll put it in an envelope with both our names on it. Then you can't duck me when you come in. I wouldn't do that, sugar. They hung up, and then the operator was there, demanding $3 more for Ma Bell. Larry, still feeling the wide and foolish grin on his face, plugged it willingly into the slot. What happens if you go to hang up at a payphone and you don't put the rest of the money in? Like, what are they going to do? Chase you down? I don't know. He looked at the change still scattered on the phone booth's shelf, picked out a quarter, and dropped it into the slot. A moment later, his mother's phone was ringing. Your first impulse is to share good news. Your second is to club someone with it. He thought, no, he believed that this was entirely the former. He wanted to relieve both of them with the news that he was solvent again. The smile faded off his lips little by little. The phone was only ringing. Maybe she had decided to go into work after all. He thought of her flushed, feverish face, and of her coughing and sneezing and saying shit impatiently into her handkerchief. She didn't think she would have gone in. He didn't think she would have gone in. The truth was, he didn't think she was strong enough to go in. He hung up and absently removed his quarter from the slot. When it clicked back. Yes, if nobody answered your call on a payphone, you got your quarter back. He went out, jingling the change in his hand. When he saw a cab, he hailed it, and as the cab pulled back into the flow of traffic, it began to spatter rain. The door was locked, and after knocking 2 or 3 times, he was sure the apartment was empty. He had rapped loud enough to make someone on the floor above rap back, like an exasperated ghost. But he would have to go in and make sure, and he didn't have a key. He turned to go down the stairs to Mr. Freeman's apartment, and that was when he heard a low groan from behind the door. There were 3 different locks on his mother's door. She was indifferent about using them, all in spite of her obsession with the Puerto Ricans. Larry hit the door with his shoulder, and it rattled loudly in its frame. I don't know. What are you doing? Just laying there, I guess. He hit it again, and the lock gave. The door swung back and banged off the wall. Mom? That groan again. The apartment was dim. The day had grown dark very suddenly, and now there was thick thunder, and the sound of rain had swelled. The living room window was half open, and white curtains bellying out over the table, then being sucked back through the opening and into the air shaft beyond. There was a glistening, wet patch on the floor where the rain had come in. Mom, where are you? Yes?
What's for dinner again?
I don't know. Have a sandwich. I was thinking fish and fries. A louder groan. He went through into the kitchen, and thunder rumbled again. He almost tripped over her. She was lying on the floor, half in and half out of her bedroom. You guys want fish? Mom. Jesus, Mom! She tried to roll over to the sound of his voice, but only her head would move, pivoting on the chin, coming to rest on the left cheek. Her breathing was strenuous and clogged with phlegm. But the worst thing, the thing he never forgot, was the way her visible eye rolled up to look at him, like the eye of a hog in a slaughtering pen. Her face was bright with fever. Larry? Going to put you on your bed, Ma. He bent, locking his knees fiercely against the trembling that wanted to start in them, and got her in his arms. Her housecoat fell open, revealing a wash-faded nightgown and fish-belly white legs sewn with puffy varicose veins. Her heat was immense. That terrified him. No one could remain... I don't care. Okay. No one could remain so hot and live. Her brains must be frying in her head. And this is what I mean by there's actually a picture. He drew a picture of Larry with his mom. and how he found her. And I wanted to share that with you guys. As if to prove this, she said querulously, "Larry, go get your father. He's in the bar." "Be quiet," he said, distraught. "Just be quiet and go to sleep, Mom." "He's in the bar with that photographer," she said shrilly into the palpable afternoon darkness, and thunder cracked viciously outside. Larry's body felt as if it was coated with slowly running slime. A cool breeze was moving through the apartment and coming from the half-open window in the living room. As if in response to it, Alice began to shiver, and the flesh of her arms humped up in gooseflesh. Her teeth clicked. Her face was a full moon in the bedroom semi-darkness. Larry scrambled the covers down, put her legs in, and pulled the blankets up to her chin. Still, she shivered helplessly, making the top blanket quiver and quake. Her face was dry and sweatless. Yeah. What's wrong? Okay. Pick her up and put her in the litter box. Is she still looking? Did she walk away when you went to get her? Or did she let you pick her up? Where's she at? Let's pick her up. Okay, so she got busted. Did you guys feed the cats yet?
Who?
Did the cats get fed yet?
Yes.
Lady?
Yes.
Okay, so she was in to feed Lady. Apparently, when you went to go toward her, she decided, whoops, I'm in trouble, and moved. She knows better. That she does. Let me know if she does it again, okay? Nick, Dad wants you.
Me?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Exactly. Always the who me. Anyway, I'm gonna keep reading, and then let me know if she does it again, okay? I love you. All right, bye. My 10-year-old cat has decided to be a pain in our tush. Stop. Don't you give me attitude. Quiet. Good girl. "He's in the bar with the photographer," she said shrilly into the palpable afternoon darkness, and thunder cracked viciously outside. Larry's body felt as if it was coated with slowly running slime. A cool breeze was moving through the apartment, coming from the half-open window in the living room. As if in response to it, Alice began to shiver, and the flesh of her arms harumphed. Oh, we did get past that to where he put the legs on her. Or put her legs in the blanket, put the blanket on her, and her face was dry and sweatless. "You go tell him I said, come out of there," she cried, and then was silent except for the heavy bronchial sound of her breathing. My apologies. He went back into the living room, approached the telephone, then detoured around it. He shut the window with a bang, and then went back to the phone. The books were on a shelf underneath the little table it sat on. He looked up the number from Mercy Hospital and dialed it, while more thunder cracked outside. A stroke of lightning turned the window he'd just closed into a blue and white X-ray plate. In the bedroom, his mother screamed breathlessly, chilling with blood. The phone rang once, then there was a buzzing sound, and then a click. A mechanically bright voice said, "This is a recording at Made at Mercy General Hospital. Right now, all of our circuits are busy. If you will hold, your call will be taken as soon as possible. Thank you. This is a recording made at Mercy General Hospital at this time, at the time of your call. We put the mop heads downstairs, his mother cried out. Thunder rolled. Those Puerto Ricans don't know nothing. Call will be taken as soon as possible. He thumped the phone down and stood over it, sweating. What kind of goddamn hospital was that? Where you got a fucking recorded announcement when your mother was dying? What was going on there? Larry decided to go down and see if Mr. Freeman could watch her while he got over to the hospital. Or should he call a private ambulance? Christ, how come nobody knew about these things when they needed to know about them? Why didn't they teach it in school? In the bedroom, his mother's laborious breathing went on and on. I'll be back, he muttered, and went to the door. He was scared, terrified for her, but underneath another voice was saying things like, "These things always happen to me," and "Why did it have to happen after I got the good news?" And most despicable of all, how bad is it going to screw up my plans? How many things am I going to have to change around? He hated that voice, wished it would die a quick, nasty death. But it just went on and on. He ran downstairs to Mr. Freeman's apartment, and thunder boomed through the dark clouds. As he reached the first floor landing, the door blew open, and a curtain of rain swept in. Chapter 20. Let me make sure that we're still doing good here. Yes, we are. Good. Chapter 20. The Harborside was the oldest hotel in Ogunquit. The view was not so good since they had built the new yacht club over on the other side, but on an afternoon like this, when the sky had been poxed with intermittent thunderstorms, the view was good enough. Franny had been sitting by the window for almost 3 hours, trying to write a letter to Grace Dugan, a high school chum, who was now going to Smith. It wasn't a confessional letter dealing with her pregnancy or the scene with her mother. Writing about those things would do nothing but depress her. And she supposed Grace would hear soon enough from her own sources in town. She had only been trying to write a friendly letter. The bicycle trip Jessie and I took to the Rangeley in May with Sam Lathrop and Sally Wenceslas. The biology final I lucked out on. Peggy Tate's, another high school friend and mutual acquaintance, new job as a Senate page, the impending marriage of Amy Lauder. The letter just wouldn't allow itself to be written. The interesting pyrotechnics of the day had played a part. How could you write while pocket thunderstorms kept coming and going over the water? More to the point, none of the news in the letter seemed precisely honest. It had twisted slightly, like a knife in the hand that gives you a superficial cut instead of peeling the potato as you had expected it to do. The bicycle trip had been jolly, but she and Jess were no longer on such jolly terms. She had indeed lucked out on her BY-7 final, but had not been lucky at all on the biology final that really counted. Neither she nor Grace had ever called all that much for Peggy Tate or Amy's forthcoming nuptials in Fran's present state seemed more like one of those ghastly sick jokes than an occasion of joy. Amy's getting married, but I'm having a baby. Ha ha ha. Feeling that the letter had to be finished, if only so she wouldn't have to wrestle with it anymore, she wrote. I've got problems of my own. Boy, do I have problems. But I just don't have the heart to write them all down. Bad enough just having to think about them. But I expect to see you by the 4th, unless your plans have changed since your last letter. 1 letter in 6 weeks? I was beginning to think someone had chopped your typing fingers off, kid. When I see you, I'll tell you all. I could sure use your advice. Believe in me and I'll believe in you. Fran. She signed her name with her customary flamboyant comic scrawl. So it took up half of the remaining white page on the note sheet. Just doing that made her feel more like an imposter than ever. She folded it into the envelope and addressed it and put it against the mirror, standing up. Finished business. There. Now what?
Where's your father?
The day was darkening again. She got up and walked restlessly around the room, thinking she ought to go out before it started to rain again. But where was she to go? Where was there to go? A movie? She'd seen the only one in town. With Jess? To Portland? To look at clothes? No fun. The only clothes she could look at, realistically, these days, were the ones with the elastic waistbands. Room for two. She had three calls today. The first one good news, the second one indifferent, and the third bad. She'd wished they'd come in reverse order. Outside the rain had begun to fall, darkening the marina's pier again. She decided to go out and walk, and to hell with the impending rain. The fresh air, the summer damp, might make her feel better. She might even stop somewhere and have a glass of beer. Happiness in a bottle. Equilibrium anyway. The first call had been from Debbie Smith in Summersworth. Fran was more than welcome, Debbie said warmly. In fact, she was needed. One of the three girls she had been sharing the apartment had oh my gosh. One of the three girls who had been sharing the apartment had moved out in May, had gotten a job in a warehousing firm as a secretary. She and Rhonda couldn't swing the rent much longer and without a third. And we both come from big families, Debbie said. Crying babies don't bother us. Fran said she'd be really ready to move in by the 1st of July. And then she hung up. She found the warm tears coursing down her cheeks. Relief tears. If she could get away from this town where she had grown up, she thought she would be all right. Away from her mother, away from her father even. The fact of the baby and her singleness would then assume some sort of sane proportion in her life. A large factor, surely, but not the only one. There was some sort of animal, a bug or a frog, she thought. It swelled up to twice its normal size when it felt threatened. The predator, in theory at least, saw this, got scared, and slunk off. She felt a little bit like that bug. And it was this whole town, the total environment. Gestalt was maybe an even better word. It made her feel that way. She knew that nobody was going to make her wear a scarlet letter, but she also knew that for her mind to finish convincing her nerves of that fact, a break with Ogunquit was necessary. When she went out on the street, she could feel people not looking at her, but getting ready to look at her. The year-round residents, of course, not the summer people. The year-round residents always had to have someone to look at. A tosspot, a welfare slacker, kid from a good family who had been picked up shoplifting in Portland or Old Orchard Beach, or the girl with the levitating belly.
Broke your desk.
No, I didn't. It's just heavy. There we go. The second call was the so-so one had been from Jess Ryder. He had called from Portland, and he had tried the house first. Luckily, he had gotten Peter, who gave him Fran's telephone number at the harbor side with no editorial comment. Still, almost the first thing he had said was, "You got a lot of static at home, huh?" "Well, I got some," she said cautiously, not wanting to go into it. That would make them conspirators of a kind. "Your mother? Why do you say that?" "She looks like the type that might freak out." It's something in the eyes, Franny. It says if you shoot my scared cows, I'll shoot yours. He was silent. I'm sorry. I didn't want to offend you. There we go. Now I'm a little bit more comfy. You didn't, she said. His description was actually quite apt. Surface apt, anyway. But she was still trying to get over the surprise of that verb, offend. It was a strange word to hear from him. Maybe there's a postulate here, she thought. When your lover begins to talk about offending you, he's not your lover anymore. Franny, the offer still stands if you say yes. I can get a couple of rings and be there this afternoon. On your bike, she thought, and almost giggled. A giggle that would be horrible, a horrible, unnecessary thing to do to him. And she covered the phone for a second just to be sure it wasn't going to escape. She had done more weeping and giggling in the last 6 days than she had done since she was 15 and started to date. No, Jess, she said, and her voice was quite calm. I mean it, he said with a startling vehemence, as if he had seen her struggling with laughter. I know you do, she said, but I'm not ready to get married. I know that about me, Jess. It was nothing to do with you. What about the baby? I'm going to have it and give it up. I haven't decided. For a moment she was silent, and she could hear other voices in other rooms. They had their own problems, and she supposed. Baby, the world is a daytime drama. We love our lives, and so we look for the guiding light. Hey, Phoebe, stop that. Can you please let Harley in here? Guiding light as we search for tomorrow. I wonder about the baby, Jess said finally. She really doubted if he did, but it was maybe the only thing he could have said that would cut her, and it did. Jess. So, where are you going? He asked briskly. You can't stay in the harbor side all summer. Really? Is that necessary? Do you need to go outside? Are you done biting her?
Yeah, they're gonna mess up your shit.
Yeah, I noticed.
Harley!
Stop it.
Phoebe!
Stop yelling. Open the door. Outside, let's go. Outside. Phoebe, Harley, outside. Outside.
I know rocks that listen better than this.
Get Harley to go
Harley!
and Phoebe will follow. Oh my
Phoebe,
God, the bullheadedness of that dog.
Jesus Christ, Harley!
Let's try this again. Shall we? Dum-de-dum-de-dum-dum.
Is it bad that I like to think of her as Harley Davidson Quinn Sterling?
It's weird. Jess, so where are you going?
Take it.
He asked briskly. You can't stay at the harbor side all
I
summer.
thought that would be funnier.
Yeah, but I'm not wanting any right now. Harbor side all summer. If you need a place, I can look around in Portland. I've got a place. Where? Or am I not supposed to ask? You're not supposed to, she said, and bit her tongue for not finding a more diplomatic way of saying it. Oh, he said. His voice was queerly flat. Finally, he said cautiously, Can I ask you something and not piss you off, Franny? Because I really want to know. It's not a rhetorical question or anything. You can ask, she agreed wearily. Mentally, she did gird herself not to be pissed off, because when Jess prefaced something like that, it was usually just before he came out with some hideous and totally unaware piece of chauvinism. Do I have any rights in all this? In this at all? Jess asked. Can't I share the responsibility and the decision? For a moment she was pissed off, and then the feeling was gone. Jess was just being Jess, trying to protect his image of himself to himself, the way all thinking people do, so they can get to sleep at night. She had always liked him for his intelligence, but in a situation like this, intelligence could be a bore. People like Jess, and herself too, had been taught all their lives that the good thing to do was commit and be active. Sometimes you had to hurt yourself, and badly, to find out it could be better to lie back in the tall weeds and procrastinate. His toils were kind, but they were still toils. He didn't want to let her get away. Jess, she said, neither of us wanted this baby. We agreed on the pill so the baby wouldn't happen. You don't have any responsibility. But, no, Jess, she said quite firmly. He sighed. Will you get in touch when you get settled? I think so. Are you still planning to go back to school? Eventually. I'm going to take the fall summer off. Maybe with something CED. If you need me, Franny, you know where I'll be. I'm not running out. I know that, Jess. If you need dough, yes, get in touch. I won't press you, but I'll want to see you. All right, Jess. Goodbye, Fran. Goodbye. When she hung up on the goodbyes, she seemed too final. The conversation. Oh, when she hung up, the goodbyes had seemed too final. The conversation unfinished. It struck her why. They had not added I love you, and that was the first. It made her sad, and she told herself not to be, but the telling didn't help. The last call had come around noon. It was from her father. They had had lunch the day before yesterday, and he told her he was worried about the effect this was having on Carla. She hadn't come to bed last night. She had spent it in the parlor, poring over the old genealogical records. He had gone in around 11:30 to ask her when she was coming up. Her hair had been down, flowing over her shoulders, and the bodice of her nightgown. And Peter said she looked wild and not strictly in touch with things. That heavy book was on her lap, and she didn't even look up at him, only continued to turn the pages. She said she wasn't sleepy. She would be up in a while. She had a cold, Peter told her, as they sat in the booth at the corner lunch, before looking at hamburgers, then eating them. Sniffles. When Peter asked her if she'd like a glass of hot milk, she didn't answer at all. He had found her yesterday morning asleep in the chair, the book on her lap. When she finally woke up, she had seemed better, more herself. But her cold was worse. She dismissed the idea of having Dr. Edmonton in, saying it was just a chest cold. She had put Vicks on her chest and a flannel square of cloth, and she thought her sinuses were clearing already. But Peter hadn't cared for the way she looked, he told Franny. Although she refused to let him take her temperature, he thought she was running a couple of degrees of fever. He had called Fran today just after the first thunderstorm had begun. The clouds, purple and black, had piled up silently over the harbor, and the rain began, at first gentle and then torrential. And as they talked, she could look out her window and see the lightning stab down at the water, beyond the breakwater, and each time it happened, there would be a little scratching noise on the wire, like a phonograph needle digging a record. She's in bed today, Peter said. She finally got to let Tom Edmonton take a look at her. She finally agreed to let Tom Edmonton take a look at her. Has he been yet? He just left. He thinks she's got the flu. Oh, Lord, Franny said, closing her eyes. That's no joke for a woman her age. No, it isn't. He paused. I told him everything, Franny. About the baby, about the fight you and Carla had. Tom's taken care of you since you were a baby yourself. And he keeps his lip buttoned. I wanted to know if that could have caused this. He said no. Flu is flu. Flu made who? Franny said bleakly. Pardon? Never mind, Fran said. Her father was amazingly broad-minded, but the AC/DC fan, he was not. Go on. Well, there's not much further to go, hun, he said. There's a lot of it around. A particularly nasty breed. It seems to have migrated out of the South, and New York is swamped with it. But sleeping in the parlor all night? She began doubtfully. Actually, he said being in an upright position was probably better for her lungs and her bronchial tubes. He didn't say anything else, but Albert Edmonton belongs to all the organizations Carla belongs to, so he didn't have to. Both of us know she's been inviting something like this. Something like this, Fran. She's president of the town historical committee. She's spending 20 hours a week in the library. She's secretary of the women's club and lovers of literature club. She's been running the March of Dimes here in town since before Fred died. And last winter she took on the Heart Fund for good measure. On top of all that, she's been trying to drum up interest in a Southern Maine Geological Society. She's run down, worn out, and that's part of the reason she blew up at you. All Edmonton said was that she had the welcome mat out for the first evil germ that passed her way. That's all he had to say. Granny, she's getting old, and she doesn't want to. She's been working harder than I have. How sick is she, Daddy? She's in bed, drinking juice and taking the pills that Tom prescribed. I took the day off, and Mr. Halliday is going to come in and sit with Mrs. Halliday is going to come in and sit with her tomorrow. She wants Mrs. Halliday so they can work out an agenda for the July meeting of the Historical Society. He sighed wildly, and lightning scratched the wire again. I sometimes think she wants to die in harness. Timidly, Fran said, Do you think she'd mind if I... Right now she would. But give her time, Fran. She'll come around. Not 4 hours later, tying her rain scarf over her hair, she wondered if her mother would come around. Maybe if she gave up the baby, no one in town would ever get wind of it. That was unlikely, though. In small towns, people scent the wind with noses of uncommon keenness. And of course, if she kept the baby, she wasn't really thinking of that, was she? Was she? Why do I have an itch on my shoulder? Driving me nuts. Do you guys know where the back scratcher is?
I just have been using you.
Uh-huh. She could feel guilt working in her as she pulled on her light coat. Her mother was run down. Of course she was. Fran had seen that when she come home from college, and the two of them exchanged kisses on the cheek. Carla had bags under her eyes.
Actually,
Her
I thought it
skin
was in
looked too
here.
yellow, I know. And the gray in her hair, which was always beauty
You
shop
could
neat.
probably use this pen.
Too far down. To the bottom of my shoulder blade. Up. Ooh, over to you, towards you, down. Go up and... Ah, thank you very much. Which was always beauty shop neat, had progressed visibly in spite of $30 rinses, but still. I have never figured out how people do their hair and keep it the same way without any mess up for like a week. She had been hysterical. Absolutely hysterical. Maybe. Absolutely hysterical. Or nets. And Franny was left asking herself exactly how she was going to assess responsibility if her mother's flu developed into pneumonia, or if she had some kind of breakdown, or even died. God, what an awful thought. That couldn't happen. Please, God, no. Of course not. The drugs she would take would knock it out. And once Franny was out of her line of visibility and incubating her little stranger silently in Somersworth, her mother would recover from the knock she had been forced to take. She would. The phone began to ring. She looked at it blankly for a moment, and outside the lightning flickered, followed by a clap of thunder so close and vicious that she jumped, wincing. Jangle, jangle, jangle. But she had had her three calls. Who else could it be? Debbie wouldn't need to call her back, and she didn't think Jess would either. Maybe it was dialing for dollars or salad master salesman. Maybe it was Jess after all, giving it the old college try. As she went to pick it up, she felt sure it was her father, and that the news would be worse. It's a pie, she told herself. Responsibility is a pie. Some of the responsibility goes with all the charity work she does. But you're only kidding if you think you're not going to have to cut a big, juicy, bitter piece for yourself and eat every bit, every bite. Hello? There was nothing but silence for a moment. She frowned, puzzled, and said hello again. Then her father said Fran and made a strange gurgling sound. Franny. Gulping sound. That gulping sound again, and Franny realized with dawning horror that her father was fighting back tears. One of her hands crept to her throat and clutched at the knot where the rain scarf was tied. Daddy, what is it? Is it Mom? Franny, I'll have to pick you up. I'll just swing by and pick you up. That's what I'll do. Is Mom all right? She screamed into the phone. Thunder whacked over the harbor side again and frightened her, and she began to cry. Tell me, Daddy. She's got worse. That's all I know, Peter said. About an hour after I talked to you, she got worse. Her fever went up. She started to rave. I tried to get Tom, and Rachel said he was out, that a lot of people are really sick. So I called the Stanford Hospital, and they said their ambulances were out on calls, both of them. But they'd add Carla to the list. The list, Franny. What the hell is this list all of a sudden? I know Jim Warrington, he drives one of the Stanford ambulances, and unless there's a car wreck on 95, he sits around and plays gin rummy all day. What's this list? He was nearly screaming. Calm down, Daddy. Calm down. Calm down. She burst into tears. She burst into tears again, and her hand left the knot of her scarf and went to her eyes. If she's still there, you'd better take her yourself. No, they came about 15 minutes ago, and Christ, Franny. There were 6 people in the back of that ambulance. One of them was Will Ronson, the man who runs the drugstore, and Carla, your mother, she came out of it a little as they put her in, and she kept saying, I can't catch my breath, Peter. I can't catch my breath. Why can't I breathe? Oh, Christ. He finished in a breaking, childish voice that frightened her. Can you drive, Daddy? Can you drive over here? Yes, he said. Yes, sure. He seemed to be pulling himself together. I'll be on the front porch. She hung up and went down the stairs quickly, her knees trembling. On the porch, she saw that, although it was still raining, the clouds of this latest thunder shower were already breaking up, and late afternoon sun was beaming through. She looked automatically for the rainbow, and saw it, far out over the water, a misty and mystic crescent. Guilt gnawed and worried at her, furry bodies inside her belly. And where that other thing was, and she began to cry again. Eat your pie, she told herself as she waited for her father to come. It tastes terrible, so eat your pie. You can have seconds, even thirds. Eat your pie, Franny. Eat every bite. Chapter 21. Are you guys going to get the dogs? I don't think we want to wait that long. All right. Give me like 5 minutes. I'm going to go check on the pups and see if they're calmed down so they can come in.
You shall not pass.
Get yourself a drink, get yourself something to eat, get yourself your cigarette, your chew, whatever you're going to do. Give me 5 minutes. They are going to be heads. It is going to be have. What's this, Sam? 76 chapters. I'm not going to be done for a couple weeks. Oh, stop that. Stop.
So are you on chapter 21 now? Did you finish your chapter?
No, I'm on chapter 21.
So you're on a new chapter.
I'm I'm going into chapter 21.
Which chapter are you ending the stream on?
I just told you.
Chapter 21?
I said I'm going into chapter 21.
You really just should have waited, because chapter 21 is like 2 1/4 pages long.
I understand that. I'll be reading.
Okay.
Got another hour of reading.
Wow.
Yeah.
My hair looks bad.
Oh, good Lord.
How many people are watching right now? 2 viewers. Should I read? Yeah, she won't let me read this. Oh, wrong book. Huh. Hmm. Oh, Lord, did this thing... Okay, no. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, "tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my book surcease of sorrow for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name was here, and the silken sad and certain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "Some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. 'Tis some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" This I whispered, and echo murmured back the word, "Lenore, Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see, then, what thereat is. This mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the window." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the stately... Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Are you reading a book to them? Smart Alex.
I thought nobody really likes down time or nothing time.
Well, I give them a chance to get what they need. Hope you guys will enjoy that. What were you reading anyway?
It's the Raven. Everybody knows the Raven.
I know some of it. What? All right, we're ready for 21. Happy now? Are you happy now? Do you need medicine? Do you need a medicine for your butt?
I thought she was allergic to that medicine.
No, she's not allergic to this medicine. She
You
has hot
sure?
spots, yes. It helps.
Maybe we should figure out what she's having an allergic reaction to.
It's normal. They're hot spots. Not allergic to anything. Could be. Seriously? Could be just going outside and being with the allergies. Better? Alright, can I read now? I'll read while I eat your butt. Chapter 21. Stu Redmond was frightened. He looked out the barred window of his new room in Stovington, Vermont, and what he saw was a small town far below. Miniature gas station signs, some sort of mill, a main street, a river, a turnpike, and beyond the turnpike, the granite backbone of a far western New England, the Green Mountains. He was frightened because this was more like a jail cell than a hospital room. He was frightened because Denninger was gone. He hadn't seen Denninger since the whole crazy three-ring circus moved from Atlanta to here. Dietz was gone too. Stu thought that maybe Denninger and Dietz were sick, perhaps dead already. Somebody had slipped, either that or the disease that Charles D. Campion had brought to Arnett was a lot more communicable than anyone had guessed. Either way, the integrity of the Atlanta Plague Center had been breached, and Stu thought that everyone who had been there was now getting a chance to do a little first-hand research on the virus they called A prime, or the superflu. They still did tests on him here, but they seemed desultory. The schedule had become slipshod. Results were scrawled down, and he had a suspicion that someone looked at them curiously, shook his head, and dumped them in the nearest shredder. That wasn't the worst, though. The worst was the guns. The nurses who came in to take blood, or spit, or urine, were now always accompanied by a soldier in a white suit, and the soldier had a gun in a plastic baggie. The baggie was fastened over the wrist of the soldier's right gauntlet. The gun was an Army issue .45, and Stu had no doubt that if he tried any of the games he had tried with Dietz, the .45 would tear the end of the baggie into smoking, burning shreds, and Stu Redmond would become a golden oldie. If they were just going through the motions now, then he had become expendable. Being under detention was bad. Being under detention and being expendable, that was very bad. He watched the 6 o'clock news very carefully every night now. The men who had attempted the coup in India had been branded outside agitators and shot. The police were still looking for the person or persons who had blown the power station in Laramie, Wyoming yesterday. The Supreme Court had decided 6-3 that known homosexuals could not be fired from civil service jobs. And for the first time, there had been a whisper of other things. AEC officials in Miller County, Arkansas, had denied there was any chance of a reactor meltdown. The automatic power plant in the small town of Folk, about 30 miles from the Texas border, had been plagued with minor circuitry problems in the equipment that controlled the pile's cooling cycle, and there was no cause for alarm. The Army units in the area were merely a precautionary measure. Stu wondered what precautions the Army could take if the Folk reactor did indeed go China syndrome. He thought the Army might be in western Arkansas for other reasons altogether. Folk wasn't all that far from Arnett. And the China syndrome, that really was something, by the way. Another item reported that the East Coast flu epidemic seemed to be in the early stages. The Russian strain, nothing to really worry about except for the very old and very young. A tired New York City doctor was interviewed in the hallway of Brooklyn Mercy Hospital. He said the flu was exceptionally tenacious for Russian A, and he urged viewers to get flu boosters. Then he suddenly started to say something else. The sound cut off, and you could only see his lips moving. The picture cut back to the newscaster in the studio, who said, "There have been some reported deaths in New York as a result of this latest flu outbreak, but contributing causes, such as urban pollution and Perhaps even the AIDS virus had been present in many of those fatal cases. Government health officials emphasized that this is Russian A flu, not the more dangerous swine flu. In the meantime, old advice is good advice. The doctors say stay in bed, get lots of rest, drink fluids, and take aspirin for the fever. The newscaster smiled reassuringly, and off camera someone sneezed. The sun was touching the horizon now, tinted it a gold that would turn to red and fading orange soon. The nights were the worst. They had flown him to a part of the country that was alien to him, and it was somehow more alien at night. In this early summer season, the amount of green he could see from his window seemed abnormal, excessive, a little scary. He had no friends. As far as he knew, all the people who had been on the plane with him when it flew from Braintree to Atlanta were now dead. He was surrounded by automations who took his blood at gunpoint. He was afraid for his life, although he still felt fine and had begun to believe he wasn't going to catch it, whatever it was. Thoughtfully, Stu wondered if it would be possible to escape from here. Chapter 22. When Creighton came in on June 24th, he found Starkey looking at the monitors, his hands behind his back. He could see the old man's West Point ring glittering on his right hand, and he felt a wave of pity for him. Starkey had been cruising on pills for 10 days, and he was close to the inevitable crash. But Crichton thought if his suspicion about the phone call was correct, the real crash had already occurred. "Len," Starkey said, as if surprised. "Good of you to come in." "De nada," Crichton said, with a slight smile. "You know who that was on the phone?" "It was really him, then?" "The president? Yes. I've been relieved." "The dirty alderman relieved me, Len. Of course I knew it was coming, but it still hurts. Hurts like hell. It hurts coming from the grinning, glad-handing sack of shit." Len Creighton nodded. "Well," Starkey said, passing a hand over his face, "it's done. Can't be undone. You're in charge now. He wants you in Washington as soon as you can get there. He'll have you on the carpet, and he'll chew your ass to a bloody rag. But you just stand there and yes sir him and take it. We've salvaged what we can. It's enough. I'm convinced it's enough. If so, this country ought to go down on its knees to you. The throttle burned my hand, but I held it as long as I could, Len. I held it." He spoke with a quiet vehemence, but his eyes wandered back to the monitor. For a moment his mouth quivered infirmly. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Well, we go back a country mile or 3, Billy, don't we?" You could say that again, soldier. Now, listen. One thing is top priority. You got to see Jack Cleveland first chance you get. He knows who we've got behind both curtains, iron and bamboo. He knows how to get in touch with them, and he doesn't stick to what has to be done. He'll do it. He'll know it'll have to be quick. I don't understand, Billy. We have to assume the worst, Starkey said, and a queer grin came over his face. It lifted his upper lip and made it wrinkle like like the snout of a dog protecting a farmyard. He pointed a finger at the sheets of yellow flimsy on the table. It's out of control now. It's popped up in Oregon, Nebraska, Louisiana, Florida. Tentative cases in Mexico and Chile. When we lost Atlanta, we lost the 3 men best equipped to deal with the problem. We're getting exactly nowhere with Mr. Stewart Prince Redmond. Did you know they actually injected him with the blue virus? He thought it was a sedative. He killed it, and no one has the slightest idea how. If we had 6 weeks, we might be able to turn the trick, but we don't. The flu story is the best one, but it is imperative that the other side never sees this as an artificial situation created in America. It might give them ideas. Cleveland has between 8 and 20 men and women in the USSR, and between 5 and 10 in each of the European satellite countries. Not even I know how many he has in red china. Starkey's mouth was trembling again. When you see Cleveland this afternoon, all you need to tell him is Rome falls. You won't forget. No, he said. His lips felt curiously cold. But do you really expect that they'll do it? Those men and women? Our people got their vials 1 week ago. They believe they contain radioactive particles to be charted by our Sky Cruise satellites. That's all they need to know, isn't it, Len? Yes, Billy. And if things do go from bad to worse, no one will ever know. Project Blue is uninfiltrated to the very end. We're sure of that. A new virus, a mutation. Our opposite numbers may suspect, but there won't be enough time. Share and share alike, Len. Yes. Starkey was looking at the monitors again. My daughter gave me a book of poems some years ago by a man named Yeats. She said every military man should read Yeats. I think it was her idea of a joke. You ever heard of Yeats, Len? I think so, Creighton said, considering and rejecting the idea of telling Starkey the man's name was pronounced Yates. I read every line, Starkey said, and he peered into the eternal silence of the cafeteria. Mostly because she thought I wouldn't. It's a mistake to become too predictable. I don't understand much of it. I believe the man must have been crazy, but I read it. Funny poetry. Didn't always rhyme, but there was one poem in that book that I've never been able to get out of my mind. It seemed as if the man was describing everything I dedicated my life to. Its hopelessness, its damned nobility. He said that things fall apart. He said the center doesn't hold. I believe he meant that things get flaky, Len. That's what I believe he meant. Yeats knew that sooner or later, things get goddamn flaky around the edges, even if he didn't know anything else. Yes, sir, Creighton said quietly. The end of it gave me goosebumps the first time I read it, and it still does. I've got that part by heart. What rough beast, its hour come around at last, slouches between Bethlehem to be born. Let her out. Creighton stood silent. He had nothing to say. The beast is on its way, Starkey said, turning around. He was weeping and grinning. It's on its way, and it's a good deal rougher than the fellow Yeats ever could have imagined. Things are falling apart. The job is to hold as much as we can for as long as we can.
Are we gonna make dinner?
I was thinking fish and fries. Unless you kids want pizza.
I could eat pizza, but I could also eat fish and fries.
Well, get them out of the cupboard or out of the freezer and start timing them. And there's also leftovers from last night in that pan.
Why don't we wait until you're done streaming?
Because it's going to be a little while. Yes, sir, Creighton said. For the first time, he felt the sting of tears in his own eyes. Yes, Billy. All you have to do is look at the time, look at the temperature, cook them.
Are these the ones that you want?
Yeah. What's behind you by the microwave? Is that the toaster? Is that the pizza rolls? Okay, that needs to go with the recycling.
Where's
Starkey
the recycling?
on the counter where it needs to go so it can go outside.
What happened to this recycling bin?
It's outside. Starkey put out his hand, and Creighton took it in both of his own. Starkey's hand was old and cold, like the shed skin of a snake in which some small prairie animal has died, leaving only its fragile skeleton.
How many boxes should I make?
One fragile skeleton within the husk of the reptile. Tears overspilled the lower arcs of Starkey's eyes and ran down his meticulously shaved cheeks. I have business to attend to, Starkey said. Yes, sir. Starkey slipped his West Point ring off his right hand and his wedding band off his left. For Cindy, he said. For my daughter. See that she gets them, Len. I will. Starkey went out the door. Billy? Len Creighton called after him. Starkey turned. Creighton stood ramrod straight, the tears still running down his own cheeks. He saluted. Starkey returned it, and then stepped out the door. The elevator hummed efficiently, marking off the floors. An alarm began to hoot mournfully, as if it somehow knew it was a warning of a situation which had already become a lost cause. When he used his special key to open it at the top, so he could enter the motor pool area, Starkey imagined Len Cretan watching him on a succession of monitors as he first picked out a Jeep and then drove it across the desert floor of the sprawling test site and through the gate marked high security zone, no admittance without special clearance. The checkpoints looked like turnpike toll booths. They were still manned, but the soldiers behind the yellowish glass were dead and rapidly mummifying in the dry desert heat. The booths were bulletproof, but they hadn't been germ-proof. Their glazed and sunken eyes stared vacantly at Starkey as he motored past, the only moving thing along the trail of dirt roads, among the quaint-set huts and low, cinder-block buildings. He stopped outside a squat blockhouse with a sign reading "Absolutely no admittance without A1A clearance" on the door. He used one key to get in and another to summon the elevator. A guard, dead as a doornail and stiff as a poker, stared at him from the glass-encased security station to the left of the elevator doors. When the elevator arrived, the doors opened. Starkey stepped in quickly. He seemed to feel the gaze of the dead guard on him, a small weight of eyes like two dusty stones. The elevator sank so rapidly his stomach turned over. A bell dinged softly when it came to a halt. The door slid open, and the sweet odor of decay hit him like a soft slap. It wasn't too strong, because the air purifiers were still working, but not even the purifiers could dispose of that smell completely. When a man has died, he wants you to know about it, Starkey thought. There were almost a dozen bodies sprawled in front of the elevator. Starkey minced among them, not wanting to tread on the decaying, waxy hand or trip over an outstretched leg. Quit. 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 Stop that. That might make him scream, and he most definitely didn't want to do that. You didn't want to scream in a tomb because the sound of it might drive you mad. And that's exactly where he was, in a tomb. It looked like a well-financed scientific research project, but what it really was now was a tomb. The elevator doors slid shut behind him. There was a hum as it began to go up automatically. It wouldn't come down unless somebody else keyed it, Starkey knew. As soon as the installation's integrity had been breached, the computers had switched all the elevators to the general containment program. Why were there these poor men and women lying here? Obviously, they had been hoping the computers would fuck up the switch over to the emergency procedures. Why not? It even had a certain logic. Everything else had fucked up. Starkey walked down the corridor which led to the cafeteria, his heels clicking hollowly. Above, the fluorescents embedded in their long fixtures like inverted ice cube trays, threw a hard, shadowless light. There were more bodies, a man and a woman with their clothes off and holes in their heads. They screwed, Starkey thought, and then he shot her, and then he shot himself. Love among the viruses. The pistol, an Army issue .45, was still clutched in his hand. The tile floor was spotted with blood and gray stuff that looked like oatmeal. He felt a terrible and thankfully transient urge to bend down and touch the dead woman's breasts to see if they were hard or flaccid. Further down the hall, a man sat with his back propped against a closed door, a sign tied around his neck with a shoelace. His chin had fallen forward, obscuring what was written there. Starkey put his fingers under the man's chin and pushed his head back. As he did so, the man's eyeballs fell back into his head with a meaty little thud. The word on the sign had been written in red magic marker. "Now you know it works," the sign said. "Any questions?" Starkey let go of the man's chin. The head remained cocked at its stiff angle, the dark eye sockets staring raptly upward. Starkey stepped back. He was crying again. He suspected he was crying because he didn't have any questions. The cafeteria doors were propped open. Outside them was a large cork bulletin board. There was to have been a league bowl-off on June 20th, Starkey saw. The Grim Gutter Ballers versus the First Strikers for the Project Championship. Also, Anna Floss wanted to ride to Denver or Boulder on July 9th. She would share driving and expenses. Also, Richard Betts wanted to give away some friendly pups, half collie, half St. Bernard. Also, there was a weekly non-denominational religious services in the caf. Starkey read every announcement on the bulletin board, and then he went inside. The smell in here was worse. Rancid food, as well as dead bodies. Starkey looked around with dull horror. Some of them seemed to be looking at him. Men, Starkey said, and then choked. He had no idea what he had been about to say. Hey, don't chew on that. That's not good for you. You let me have that. Thank you. He walked slowly over to where Frank D. Bruce lay with his face in the soup. He looked down at Frank de Bruce for several moments. Then he pulled Frank de Bruce's head up by the hair. The soup bowl came with him, still stuck on his face by soup which had long since congealed, and Starkey struck at it in horror, finally knocking it off. The bowl clunked to the floor, upside down. Most of the soup still clung to Frank de Bruce's face, like moldy jelly. Starkey produced his handkerchief and wiped off as much of it as he could. Frank de Bruce's eyes appeared to be gummed shut by soup. But Starkey forebore to wipe his lids. He was afraid Frank de Bruce's eyes would fall back into his skull, like the eyes of the man with the sign. He was even more afraid that the lids, freed of the glue which held them, might roll up like window shades. He was mostly afraid of what the expression in Frank D. Bruce's eyes might be. "Private Bruce," he said softly, "at ease." He put the handkerchief carefully over the face of Frank D. Bruce. It stuck there. Starkey turned and walked out of the cafeteria in long, even strides, as if on parade ground. Halfway back to the elevator, he came to a man with a sign around his neck. To the man. Starkey sat down beside him, loosened the strap over the butt of his pistol, and put the barrel of the gun into his mouth. When the shot came, it was muffled and undramatic. None of the corpses took the slightest notice. The air purifiers took care of the puff of smoke. In the bellows of Project Blue, there was silence. In the cafeteria, Starkey's handkerchief came unstuck from Private Frank de Bruce's face and wafted to the floor. Frank D. Bruce did not seem to mind. But Len Cretan found himself looking into the monitor, which showed Bruce more and more often, and wondering why in hell Billy couldn't have gotten the soup out of the man's eyebrows while he was at it. He was going to have to face the President of the United States soon, very soon. But the soup congealing in Frank D. Bruce's eyebrows worried him more, much more. Chapter 23. Randall Flagg, the dark man, strode south on US 51, listening to the night sounds that pressed close to both sides of this narrow road that would take him sooner or later out of Idaho and into Nevada. From Nevada, he might go anywhere, from New Orleans to Nagales, from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine. It was his country, and none knew or loved it better. He knew where the roads went, and he walked them at night. Now, an hour before dawn, he was somewhere between Grasmere and Riddle, west of Twin Falls. It's fine. It'll still cook the same. West of Twin Falls.
Yeah, there's
Still
two that were fused together.
It's fine. Still north of the Duck Valley Reservation, it spreads across 2 states. And wasn't it fine? He walked rapidly, run-down boot heels clocking against the paved surface of the road. And if car lights showed on the horizon, he faded back and back, down over the soft shoulder to the high grass, where the night bugs made their homes, and the car would pass him, the driver perhaps feeling a slight chill as if he had driven through an air pocket, his sleeping wife and children stirring uneasily, as if all had been touched by a bad dream at the same instant. He walked south on US 51, the worn heels of his sharp-toed cowboy boots clocking on the pavement, a tall man of no age in faded, pegged jeans and denim jacket. His pockets were stuffed with 50 different kinds of conflicting literature, pamphlets for all seasons, rhetoric for all reasons. When this man handed you a tract, you took it no matter what the subject, the dangers of atomic power plants, the role played by the international Jewish cartel, and the overthrow of friendly governments, the CIA, Contra, cocaine connection, the farm workers' unions, the Jehovah's Witness. If you can answer these 10 questions, yes, you have been saved. The blacks for militant equality, the code of the Klan. He had them all, and more too. There was a button on each breast of his denim jacket. On the right, a yellow smile face. On the left, a pig wearing a policeman's cap. The legend was written beneath in red letters, which dripped to simulate blood. How's your pork? He moved on, not pausing, not slowing, but alive to the night. His eyes seemed almost frantic with the night's possibilities. There was a Boy Scout knapsack on his back, old and battered. There was a dry hilarity in his face, and perhaps in his heart too. You would think, and you would be right. It was the face of a hatefully happy man, a face that radiated a horrible, handsome warmth, a face to make water glasses shatter in the hands of tired truck stop waitresses, to make small children crash their trikes into board fences and then run wailing to their mommies with steak-shaped splinters sticking out of their knees. It was a face guaranteed to make barroom arguments over batting averages turn bloody. He moved on south, somewhere on US 51, between Grasmere and Riddle, now closer to Nevada. Soon he would camp and sleep the day away. Waking up as evening drew on, he would read as his supper cooked over a small, smokeless campfire. It didn't matter what. Words from some battered and coverless paper book porno novel, or maybe Mein Kampf, or an R. Crumb comic book, or one of the baying reactionary position papers from the American Firsters, or the Sons of the Patriots. When it came to the printed word, Flagg was an equal opportunity reader. After supper, he would commence walking again, walking south on this excellent 2-lane highway, cutting through the God-forsaken wilderness, watching and smiling and listening as the climate grew more arid, strangling everything down to sagebrush and tumbleweed, watching as the mountains began to poke out of the earth like dinosaur spines. By dawn tomorrow or the day after, he would pass into Nevada, striking Alhi first and then Mountain City. And in Mountain City, there was a man named Christopher Bradenton, who would see that he had a clean car and some clean papers, and then the country would come alive as in all its glorious possibilities. A body politic with its network of roads embedded in its skin like marvelous capillaries, ready to take him, the dark speck of foreign matter, anywhere and everywhere. Heart, liver, lights, brain. He was a clot looking for a place to happen. A splinter of bone, hunting a soft organ to puncture. A lonely lunatic cell looking for a mate that would set up housekeeping and raise themselves a cozy little Milligant rumor. He hammered along, arms swinging by his sides. He was known, well known, along the highways and hiding that are traveled by the poor and the mad, by the professional revolutionaries, and by those who had been taught to hate so well that their hate shows on their faces like hairpin, like harlots, and they are unwanted except by those like them. Those like them who welcome them to cheap rooms with slogans and posters on the walls, to basements where lengths of sawed-off pipe were held in padded vices while they are stuffed with high explosives, to back rooms where lunatic plans are laid, to kill a cabinet member, to kidnap a child of a visiting dignitary, or to break into a boardroom meeting of Standard Oil with grenades and machine guns and murder in the name of the people. He was known there, and even the maddest of them could only gaze upon his dark and grinning face at an oblique angle. I know. Don't. Yeah, go ahead and use it. The woman he took to bed with him, even if they reduced intercourse to something as casual as getting a snack from the refrigerator, accepted him with a stiffening of the body, a turning away of countenance. So, okay. They took him the way they might take a ram with golden eyes or a black dog. And when it was done, they were cold, so cold. It seemed impossible they could ever be warm again. When he walked into a meeting, the hysterical babble ceased. The backbiting, recriminations, accusations, and the ideological rhetoric. For a moment, there would be dead silence, and they would start to turn on him, and then turn away, as if he had come to them with some old and terrible engine of destruction cradled in his arms, sometimes 1,000 times worse than the plastic explosives made in the basement labs of renegade chemistry students. Wow. Or the black market arms obtained from some greedy army post supply sergeant. It seemed that he had come to them with a device gone rusty with blood and packed for centuries in the cosmoline of screams, but now ready again. Carried to their meeting like some infernal gift, a birthday cake with nitroglycerin candles, and when the talk began again, it would be rational and disciplined as madmen might make it, and things would be agreed upon. He rocked along, his feet easy in the boots, which are comfortably sprung in all the right places. His feet in those boots were old lovers. Christopher Bradenton in Mountain City knew him as Richard Fry. Bradenton was a contractor on one of the underground railroad systems by which fugitives moved. 6 different organizations, from the Weathermen to the Geneva Brigade, saw that Bradenton had money. He was a poet who sometimes taught free university classes or traveled in the western states of Utah, Nevada, and Arizona, speaking to high school English classes, stunning middle-class boys and girls, he hoped, with the news that poetry was alive, narcoleptic to be sure, but still possessed of a certain hideous vitality. He was in his late 50s now, but Bradenton had been dismissed from one California college 20-some years ago for getting too chummy with the SDS. He had been busted in the Great Chicago Pig Convention of 1968, formed his ties to one radical group after another, first embracing the craziness of these groups and being swallowed whole. The dark man walked and smiled. Bradenton represented just one end of one conduit, and there were thousands of them. The pipes the crazies moved through, carrying their books and bombs. The pipes were interconnected, the signposts disguised, but readable to the initiate. In New York, he was known as Robert Frank with a Q, and his claims that he was a black man had never been disputed, although his skin was very light. He and a black veteran of NAM, the black had more than enough hate to make up for his missing left leg. He offed 6 cops in New York and New Jersey. In Georgia, he was Ramsey Forrest, a distant descendant of Nathan Bedford Forrest, and in his white sheet, he had participated in 2 rapes, a castration, and the burning of a nigger shanty town. But that had been long ago in the early 60s, during the first civil rights surge. He sometimes thought that he might have been born in that strife. He certainly could not remember much that had happened to him before that, except that he came originally from Nebraska, and that he had once attended high school classes with a redhead, bandy-legged boy named Charles Starkweather. He remembered the civil rights marches of 1960 and 61 better, the beatings, the night rides, the churches that had exploded as if some miracle inside them had grown too large to be contained. He remembered drifting down to New Orleans in 62 and meeting a demented young man who was handing out tracts urging America to leave Cuba alone. That man had been a certain Mr. Oswald, and he had taken some of Oswald's tracts, and he still had a couple, very old and crumpled, in one of his many pockets. He had sat on 100 different committees of responsibility. He had walked in demonstrations against the same dozen companies on 100 different college campuses. He wrote the questions that most discomforted those in power when they came to lecture, but he never asked the questions himself. Those power merchants might have seen his grinning, burning face as some cause for alarm and fled from the podium. Likewise, he never spoke at rallies because the microphones would scream with hysterical feedback and circuits would blow. But he had written speeches for those who did speak. And on several occasions, those speeches had ended in riots, overturned cars, student strikes, and votes, and violent demonstrations. For a while in the early 70s, he had been acquainted with a man named Donald DeFreeze, and had suggested that DeFreeze take the name Sinque, or Cinque, Cinque. He had helped lay plans that resulted in the kidnapping of an heiress, and it had been he who suggested that the heiress be made crazy instead of simply ransomed.
Well, that's enough.
2 for each. He had left the small That's why I said make fries. He had left the small Los Angeles house where DeFreeze and the others had fried not 20 minutes before the police moved in. He slunk away up the street, his bulging and dusty boots clocking on the pavement, a fiery grin on his face that made mothers grab up their children and pull them into the house, a grin that made pregnant women feel premature labor pains, and later, when a few tattered remnants, okay, making sure she wasn't eating it, when a few tattered remnants of the group were swept up, all they knew was there had been someone else associated with the group, maybe someone important, maybe a hanger-on, a man of no age, a man called the Walking Dude, or sometimes the Boogeyman. He strode on at a steady, grounding, eating pace. 2 days ago, he had been in Laramie, Wyoming, part of an ecotage group that had blown a power station. Now we know. Today, he was on US 51, between Grasmere and Riddle, on his way to Mountain City. Tomorrow, he would be somewhere else. And he was happier than he had ever been because he stopped. Something was coming. He could feel it, almost taste it on the night air. He could taste it, a city hot taste that came from everywhere, as if God was planning to cook out and all of the civilization was going to be the barbecue. Already the charcoal was hot, white, and flaky outside, as red as demons' eyes inside. A huge thing, a great thing. His time of transfiguration was at hand. He was going to be born for the second time. He was going to be squeezed out of the laboring cunt of some great sand-colored beast that even now lay in the throes of its contractions, its legs moving slowly as the birth blood gushed, its sun-hot eyes glaring into the emptiness. He had been born when times changed, and the times were going to change again. It was in the wind of this soft Idaho evening. It was almost time to be reborn, he knew. Why else could he suddenly do magic? He closed his eyes, his hot face turning up slightly to the dark sky, which was prepared to receive the dawn. He concentrated, smiled. The dusty, run-down heels of his boots began to rise off the road. 1 inch, 2, 3 inches. The smile broadened into a grin. Now he was a foot up and 2 feet off the ground. He hung steadily over the road with a little dust blowing beneath him. Then he felt the first inches of dawn strain the sky, and he lowered himself down again. The time was not yet, but the time was soon. He began to walk again, grinning, now looking for a place to lay up for the day. The time was soon, and that was enough to know for now. And we are going to stop there because we are heading on to chapter 24 tomorrow morning. So we will stop there. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. We did 6 chapters. Like, we did really good. We did really good. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Oh, 5 chapters, excuse me. We're going on to 24. So, yeah, I think we did good. I think we did really good. We're going to stop there for tonight. I've read almost 2 hours minus a few minutes here and there leaving. But to do 5 chapters, that's our goal each day, depending on how big the chapters are. So I think we've done really, really well. I will be back here tomorrow morning. I should be here around 11. So we will see how it goes. But yeah, we should be here around 11 tomorrow. So, sorry, I had a yawn. I am going to go for the evening and go spend some time with my family. Y'all do the same, or, do your evening, enjoy yourselves. Just remember, I love you. Follow if you can, and enjoy yourselves. I love y'all. Y'all have a good night. Bye.